Hey, I'm Di McQueen, licensed clinical social worker, family and addiction expert. I'm here with Dr. Brian Jackson, my longtime cohort who specializes in the field of addiction. Welcome to Healing Families Shattered by Addiction.
Di and I have worked with addicts, alcoholics, and their families for over 30 years combined. Our podcast and coaching programs focus on families who have a loved one suffering from addiction. Our experience has been that this disease affects families as much, if not more, than the addict or alcoholic.
Is your world spinning out of control? Are you codependent? Are you experiencing worry, loss of sleep, and difficulty concentrating? If so, you're in the right place. Brian and I have both personally lived it, learned it, and now we're going to teach you tools and techniques on how to get your life back that you thought was shattered by addiction.
Okay, let's dive in.
Brian and I are so excited to introduce to you our new sponsor, Lakeview Health. They are a wonderful residential treatment center. Whether it's the family member who is looking for a place or the addict or alcoholic themselves, this would be the place that we would refer them to. Brian, you have many years of experience with Lakeview.
Yeah, Lakeview Health is a center of excellent addiction treatment. They take an evidence-based approach, medical approach to treating this complex brain disease. They hold the Joint Commission's Golden Seal, and they were voted one of America's best treatment centers by Newsweek magazine. They deliver dual diagnosis, gender-responsive, and trauma-informed care at their gorgeous facility here in Jacksonville, Florida. But they do see people from all over the world do come here to Jacksonville to go to treatment at Lakeview. Their levels of care include medically supervised detox, which a lot of people do need. Then they stabilize them in a residential rehabilitation and partial hospitalization program. They have board-certified physicians, master-level therapists, and they work to address the unique needs of each patient. So in other words, it's not a cookie-cutter program. They help individuals build skills for long-term sobriety. So if you or someone you know needs treatment, please visit their site at lakeviewhealth.com. We also have a hyperlink on our website at familyandaddictionexperts.com where you can just click and get some information about Lakeview Health. And Di, I think you have a number for people to call if they would like to inquire about treatment.
I sure do. That number is 888-480-3799. That's 888-480-3799. Give them a call.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Brian Jackson. I'm here with my partner, Ms. Di McQueen, and we're here today to talk about boundaries, setting boundaries with your loved one who may be suffering from the disease of addiction. You know, in boundaries, I think a lot of times when family members hear boundary, they think of an all or nothing situation where, you know, you just completely cut yourself off from the person who's suffering from addiction. But that's not the case. That's not what we're here to recommend today. But I mean, there are signs and symptoms of things that you might be feeling that are a good indication that there are boundaries that need to be set in a very healthy way that's going to be helpful not only to you, but also to the family member who may be, involved in addiction or alcoholism. And Di was going to go through some of the feelings that we might have as family members that are very, very uncomfortable and maybe sometimes outside of our recognition. So hopefully today we can point some of those out to you and you can identify with some of these things. And if you do, we do have some solutions for you and tools and techniques that you can set some healthy boundaries that will be helpful to the entire family. So Di, what are some of the feelings that you've heard from family members that go on in a relationship like this with somebody who has addictions?
Well, hi, Bri. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. It's always great to see you and talk with you. That's great. So Brian mentioned that we're talking about ways in which families can maybe determine whether or not they're doing some destructive behaviors or reinforcing behaviors that aren't so healthy with their loved ones. For instance, do you accept unacceptable behavior? And those are simple little things like someone talking to you disrespectfully. And, you say be home by 11 and they don't come in till midnight. Something of that nature. And the big one, right? I always think about this when I think about what other people will think, right? When we're spending time worrying about what the neighbors think, what, your parents are going to think, what, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, and everybody else, the community, right? In general, we're probably having a problem because if somebody else in our family has addiction, it really has no bearing on us, right? So that's a real cue. Hoping it will go away, but pretending like I don't see what's going on, right? That's a really big one. We go into denial and, we just go like, okay, if I pretend long enough, it will just go away. And that might help me, but it really doesn't help me. And in fact, something needs to be done. Keeping everything a secret. That's the opposite extreme, right? Worrying about what everybody's thinking, but, I don't tell anybody anything. And, the fact is, again, what's going on if you need to talk to your few people and you need to express so that you have a place to vent or be able to open up about what's really happening. It's very important that you don't keep secrets with those people.
Yeah, and I think it's exhausting, to try and keep a secret. One of the sayings we have is you're as sick as your secret. So keeping a secret like this is really, really can become debilitating because it's always there in the back of your mind. You'd like to share it with somebody. You'd like to get some help, but you really don't know which way to turn,
Absolutely, which kind of leads into what I was thinking next is how I'm powerless over this change. I really can't do anything. I personally don't have the ability to do this myself. It really has to be the loved one who decides they want to do something. I certainly can be a help and, maybe someone for them to be supported by, but I can't do it for them. And we become powerless over these things. Thinking that, I came from a family of alcoholics, my brother is a drug addict, so this is just my lot in life that now my kid has a problem. That's not true. We can make up some changes and we have to put some things in place to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. Maybe asking someone for help is extremely uncomfortable. These are things that, again, I don't think I can do. But in fact, they just reinforce, destructive behaviors and not having boundaries set for yourself or others.
Yeah, and I think the fear, that is behind asking for help is really strong because, again, there is some quote-unquote embarrassment associated with this when, in fact, it is a disease and the disease is affecting you. It's affecting you to the negative. And what's wrong with asking for help? You are truly not alone in this. You're not terminally unique. There's, all kinds of people out there that are suffering the same things you are. And I think that if you can identify with other people or realize that asking for help is really empowering yourself to try and break the cycle that Di was just talking about, putting your head in the sand and just hoping that it's going to go away is not a solution for anybody.
Absolutely. And these kinds of things I'm sure most of us will resonate with, which is doing things for them, like making their beds. I've even seen people go as far as going out and working for them. They didn't show up that day, so the parent feels so guilty that they go out and they take over their job for them. Covering up and lying. How many times have we made up a story, but, we're not to blame. They don't, they didn't do anything wrong. We come up with these stories. And it's really, again, because of our own discomfort in the situation and the fear. I think Brian mentioned, the fear is like the driving force. Because we're scared they're going to die and it's somehow going to be our fault. And, we've done this to them. So, in fact, if you see yourself doing things like that, you got to ask yourself some hard questions and go like, maybe my boundaries are a little bit loose. And
yeah, and we keep, cushioning them from the consequences, and, when people do interventions, we create a crisis. And when I say that we create a crisis is, we present them with something that if they lose it, that it's going to, cause a big consequence for them in their lives. For example, not continuing to give them any money. But this, exhausting of covering up, feeling of covering up for them, making up stories for them, it just is not helping the addict and alcoholic grow up, take responsibility, and take ownership of the consequences that are resulting in their life from their behaviors.
Yeah, and I mean, I can speak for myself, right? When I was involved in this situation, I mean, my boundaries were so loose. I was making up stories. We had a business together, so I would, tell the guys he was sick. He tripped and fell. He has a meeting somewhere else. He's on this board, whatever. Anything I could come up with to make up an excuse as to why he wasn't there. And a lot of times I didn't want him there because he was so messed up, it wouldn't have been a good thing anyway. But, and you get to that place. I mean, I was doing things that I never dreamed I would ever do. Paying bills, going out and working second jobs just to make sure that you could get these things taken care of. And it was about the stigma and, oh my God, what if people found out? What would they think? The reality was everyone knew way before I did. So It was like, there you go, right? So, Brian, that is one of those questions that kind of leads me. I think most everybody always says to, when you're talking about boundaries, what is one? What is a boundary? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think that the good news is that you can set boundaries that are healthy and that would be good for you and possibly get the person who is suffering from addiction to open their eyes and say, wow, there's something I need to do about this because nobody is cushioning the consequences that I'm facing. Setting boundaries with the addict can be difficult, but it can also lead to the much needed recovery process. Almost all family members of the addicted loved one can attest to dealing with the addicted can be problematic, in our lives, in our work and relationships with other people. And just remember, if you set a boundary and you don't keep it, people will not change what you'll tolerate. But establishing healthy boundaries has to be a concerted effort from all the family members involved. All parties must agree and not waver from the boundaries being set, because the person will go to the one person who will cave. So it needs to be a unified boundaries that are being set. And, you can clearly tell that the boundaries that you have set are staying in place, and we're not going to waver from them at all. So let me just give you like 5 examples of boundaries that can be put in place. So there's no one size that fits all, but there are some effective ways to set boundaries, and these are very, very specific. And I think it's important that we give you specific examples of boundaries that you can set that might apply to what's been going on in your life and things that you can do going forward. One, if the person is arrested, you make it clear that you will not bail them out and you won't pay for their attorney. Because think about it, they get in trouble and you bail them out and pay for their attorney. What have they really learned? 2, ridicules and insults are completely prohibited. Addicts and alcoholics, when they don't get their way, have a tendency to get angry and scream and holler and try and get you to change your mind. But it's unacceptable, and you need to make that clear to them. And then 3, I will not cover up for you no matter what. I'm not going to make excuses for you anymore. You're on your own. Whatever happens, is on you. And then 4, I will not provide you with money no matter what, because obviously without money, they're not going to be able to go out and get drugs or go buy alcohol. So the relationship with the addict can be a very difficult one. The challenge you'll face is to care for them without losing yourself in the process. I mean, it really is a double-edged sword. You want to help them, but you love them. And so how do you express that love to them? By setting a boundary as opposed to enabling them to continue the behavior that they've been doing. So it's a frustrating experience, but more and more I see people, when they put these boundaries in place, that they're no longer protecting and coddling the person who's suffering from addiction, and now it's time for the addict or alcoholic to change their behavior. And because otherwise we keep doing what we've been doing, we're going to keep getting what we've been getting, and that's not working. So
right. And that is so true. I'm going to go over a few guidelines. So for setting effective boundaries, pretty straightforward and simple, right? But it's not easy to implement. So number one, back up your boundary setting with action. So whatever it is that you're going to do, you have to make sure that you are willing to go ahead and back it up with action statements, right? And follow through. It's very, very important. The worst thing that anybody can do is have a fluid boundary right from the get-go, right? Which means I state this. If you get arrested, we're not bailing you out. That is backing up by action. So the follow-through would be that when we get arrested, you absolutely do not bail them out. Number two, be direct, firm, but gracious, right? We don't have to yell and scream. We don't have to carry on. We just have to know what it is that we want to do, and you show respect and tell them straight up that's the way this is going to go. No debating. We're not going to debate this issue because usually we get into the defending and over-explaining things. It just needs to be clear, concise, and stated. You must have support, that's easily available so that from the beginning, you know that you've got peeps in your corner kind of helping you out. So as Brian stated, like the whole family, if everybody's on the same page and so, Johnny starts calling, Susie and brother Dan and etc. Everybody's on the same page to say negative. We're not going to do that. And that's really, really important because one cog in the wheel will screw up the whole idea, right, of what goes on. But that doesn't mean you have to cave on your boundary. Even if, brother Dan does, you do not have to. You just need to stay strong and make sure that you don't give in. And sometimes that's a really, really hard thing to do. They can work you. They're very, very good at manipulation and, guilting you into things that somehow you're like, how did that happen again? Right?
Yeah. And so you need to remember that what you've been doing up till now, and I said this earlier, has not been working. But by setting these boundaries, you're really helping the addict realize that they need to help themselves. And the system that was in place is no longer in place. And so those are the changes that really are effective. And, Di and I just wanted to spend some time talking about boundaries today, what works, what doesn't work. So I think it's really important that you give this a try. And I know it's a lot for us to cover just in one podcast. So we do have information for you that we can send you that might give you some guidelines that you can just read and stay with as you go forward in this process. And you can just contact us at info@familyandaddictionexperts.com, and we will be more than happy to send you some information on boundaries. So I hope you walk away or step away from this podcast and realize that there are choices that you have. There are choices that you can make for yourself that will not only help you, but help your loved one who's suffering. And hopefully we'll get them into recovery and things will start changing in a positive way.
Yeah, and one last thing, Bri, I'd kind of like to add in that there are benefits for people. Not only are you setting all these boundaries, but there's a benefit for you. And the benefits are things like my well-being. I get to contribute to my own well-being and I have power over that. And it makes a big difference, when you kind of go like, oh my gosh, for a long time I felt like I have no power. So this is something you actually have power over and it will make you feel better. And so there's not so much of this constantly feeling so shook up, anxious, etc. Freedom from the bad behavior. You don't have to, if you set a boundary, you're not feeling that pain anymore. At first you might, because it's really hard to hold that line, but I think it's really cool when you finally go, they can do what they need to do. And my hope, our hope, is that oftentimes what you believe that's something that's counterintuitive, that by setting a boundary, you actually help them finally start to realize they must get some form of help. It increases your self-esteem and your own self-respect, because guess what? I'm not doing these things that's enabling my person to continue to do what they needed to do. I show myself self-respect because I'm not allowing someone to talk to me or treat me in the ways that I have been. And I don't have that resentment, that burn that's going on all the time. It helps me a lot because I can learn how to respect others, right? And I get respect from others because they're like, wow, they're serious about this and they're going to hold that line. And again, it's always done with love, kindness. It's not, you don't have to get mad. You just have to follow through. That's the deal. And it means direct communication, right? I'm saying what I mean what I say, but I don't have to be mean in how I say it. It's really important to be honest, direct, and these are things that actually help us, generally speaking, and we'd feel so much better, overall. So there's benefits to setting boundaries as well.
Yeah, and I think the overall message is, you're no longer running the show. We have every right to make our own choices for ourselves, and that, you have the right to make choices for yourself. And, we're both going to end up with the consequences we end up with. And hopefully in our case, we're going to start feeling better.
Exactly. So it's fantastic. So remember us, if you need some additional information, at info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's familyandaddictionexperts.com. And we'd love to hear from you guys. Email us anytime. Bri, I think this is a good start on boundary setting. And, I don't know if you have any closing words, but I think it's really important for families to remember they have and can do this.
Well, I think this is going to be a series of, family survival kit information that we're going to give you. And today we wanted to give you some information on boundaries, and we will have other topics that we think will be very helpful for you and for your family. So we look forward to our next podcast.
All right. Thanks so much. Good chatting with you, B.
All right, Di. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining our podcast, Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. We'll be back in a couple weeks with more important tools, techniques, and ways for you to focus on you instead of the alcoholic or addict in your world.
Until then, please go to our website, familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's familyandaddictionexperts.com. You'll also see links to our Facebook and Instagram pages. Please also, if you have any emails that you would like to send us, that's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. With any thoughts, feelings, questions that you may have for us, we would love to hear from you, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.